On today's Rebel's Edge, it's Fed Week for those of you that celebrate, and I know you do. Futures looking like 50 basis points may be coming for us this week. We'll find out soon enough. Traders are loving gold. Cue the Austin Powers music as the gold rush continues heading into this first rate cut. And finally, do we have a bad apple in the bunch? iPhone 16 starting to disappoint as it fails to woo buyers with its hefty price tag and lack of new functionality. Apple shares suffering, dragging the NASDAQ down a bit as we go to air. All of that and more on today's Rebel's Edge.
All right. To quote Matthew McConaughey, by the way, you know who the number one college football team in the country is? University of Texas. Those horns, hook them, baby.
That was a giveaway with the McConaughey reference.
Yes, it was.
Even I got that one. Even I got that one.
You know more about sports than you like to lead on. So, and it's great. And I'll tell you what, I'm happy for you because A-Raj came back and bounced back and had a really nice game this week. So that's all good. But I'll tell you what, let's just jump into the macro minute right now, just because I think we got as much fun in front of us as we've ever had. So, Mark, I'm going to start off this way. It's Fed week. We all know that. That follows up CPI Wednesday. Woo! Then you've got PPI Thursday. Woo! The markets flipped. They absolutely ripped. And to the movement to the upside and a little bit of follow through today. Not for the NASDAQ, but everybody else. I think folks are definitely going to be focused on the Fed. There's no doubt about it. They got the data last week. Now it's all about 25 or 50 basis points, Mark.
Yeah, listen, Dow setting new records again. Right, as we've said in several of our services, Rebel Roundup, we talked about it on Cocktail Hour this past week, even on the Rebel Setup, higher highs and lower lows, right, heading into this Fed decision, heading into this election. Volatility is going to reign supreme. And yeah, I mean, 61% right now on the CME in terms of 50 basis points. I'm a little worried about that, Pete, because number one, we've been saying 25 or die for weeks and weeks now, and I don't like being wrong. And number two, I think the market might get a little ahead of itself with this 50 basis point expectation, because when we get 25, and I'm telling you again, we're not getting 50 tomorrow, you might see a little bit of disappointment. So concerned about that. We are all, of course, watching. It's really the only thing happening this week, the market trading while touching new highs in a fairly narrow range ahead of that big Fed decision.
You know what I think is happening? And let's just go to the fantastic futures. One of the things about the futures is we dried up last week until we got some of those numbers. We got that CPI. We got that PPI. Before that, we were averaging 40 million contracts the previous couple of days, Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, we averaged around 54 million contracts per day. Actually finished out the week very strong. But I'll tell you, Mark, this whole group that's out there that's now pushing the 50, I think it's the same idiots that stood there in January, February, and March who said, we're getting 7 rate cuts this year. Well, they were wrong then, and I got a funny feeling they might be wrong again with this 50. I'm with you. I don't know that you want to rock these markets at all with this quarter point. All that being said, the volatility index is tight. We talk about that big explosive move last week where it got all the way up, but should it have been at 28 instead of 22? The answer is yes. That was a sign, because that turn and burn down 700 on the Dow to finish up a couple of hundred points. That says a lot. That's why that VIX was holding up where it was around 22, not 28. And right now I'm looking at a VIX that's trading 16 to 18, very tight.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Pete, I mean, the trend we've been seeing here for weeks now is that we get these dips, we get these little corrections, and the institutions just come in and buy them like every single time. There's a fair amount of money on the sidelines that we think is probably ready to come off as soon as we start to get rate cuts. I wouldn't go bearish into the end of this week, particularly on this first cut, even if we do wind up with 50. But how about the fantastic futures on gold, man? We got there. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. GSAM set that 2,600 handle. We hit the 2,600 and over as the gold rush continues. Folks, we've been talking about this for weeks now, about 3 weeks now. I talked about it 2.5 weeks ago on Newsmax When I was on with John in our inaugural appearance there, they asked me where the smart money's headed going into this first rate cut. We called a bull on gold, and it has paid off.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's jump into our stocks. We've got a lot to cover here, man, in a short time to get there. Eastbound, watch old Bandit run. Hey, we got Oracle. Now, Oracle is ripping, it's ripping, and it's ripping. They came into their earnings already with a really nice move this year, continuing that move. Just $1 off the 52-week highs, Mark. This is a stock that absolutely, everybody is, the Mag 7, all this, all that. It's only these guys. Well, take a look at this one. You're right there pushing $1 away from the 52-week highs for Oracle. It's absolutely flying to the upside. It's a combination of AI. It's a combination of cloud. It's who they're competing with, and they're winning against, at least as far as market share. You still got Apple at the very top, right? When you're looking at cloud, Apple, AWS, they've got it. But I'll tell you what, these guys are definitely turning and burning, and they are showing a lot about what they've got, how they're doing it. The performance has been absolutely incredible. And Mark, you might even be able to point out a little bit of unusual option activity that we've seen in this name.
Yeah, I can point out some unusual, Pete. And this is a really, really interesting story with this stock, of course, right? I mean, 2029, $100 billion in anticipated revenue. You had some people calling like, that's fairly aspirational, even for Oracle. But it seems like traders think that it actually could get there. And by the way, for me, my money is on the strength of their GPUs, right? Those are graphic processing units. And we've talked about this a lot, Pete. The demand for AI chips, the future demand for AI chips is in the graphic processing units. It takes a lot more power, it takes a lot more sophistication to run AI applications on graphics versus just text. But yeah, we had unusual on the 10th of September. We had some pretty bullish call buying activity. They came in and bought 4,700 of the October 165s. Then on actually even earlier today, some of those folks came back in, bought 12,000 of the September 170s. Really, really interesting. Obviously, that's part of the reason why people subscribe for our unusual option activity services. There's lots of alpha to be gleaned when we see that unusual, and we send that information along to our subscribers. So we'll see if they can pull it off. $100 billion, man, by 2029. I know it sounds like it's far away. It's not, but we'll see if they can do it.
Well, they're talking about 16% annual growth, all these different things that they're talking about at Oracle, absolutely crushing it, Mark. And that's why it's not an option. It's why we wrote that book. It's not an option, right? I mean, the reality is this. How much, from a leverage standpoint, how many people out there can actually buy 1,000 shares of $165 stock? Probably very few, quite frankly. But could you have bought options? You sure as heck could. And that's why we love what we do. And you've got that leverage. And you reduce the risks if you're wrong and things go to the south side. You only lose what you paid as opposed to that pounding you can feel if they start selling off. All right, next up, Apple. Now, Apple's always an interesting one, right? I'm one of the few people out there that's going to throw a little criticism towards Tim Cook. I think that they've done a lot of things right. They certainly have. He's done a lot of things right. But recently, I'm not so sure that they are continuing to do things right. There's a lot of different areas where I think that they could have some massive improvements, one of which is, where is their home office? That could be somewhere else. I don't know when that's ever going to happen. If I sat on the board, that would happen, by the way. I would move or tell them, hey, look, you've got an opportunity here. What do you want to do? But in any case, the iPhone, not blowing anybody away. People are very disappointed. So when you're looking at some of the numbers out there, and a few analysts out there are looking at those numbers saying, hey, this doesn't look like anything we've seen in a long time from Apple as far as this launch, the September launch that we all look forward to. But when you do look at what they got $86 billion in free cash flow. So I don't think they're too worried about much of anything from that perspective. They've got their own Apple Intelligence or AI, however you want to frame that. But the forward PE at a 29, Apple used to be closer to 19, 20, somewhere in that range. Forward PE says they might even be a little bit expensive right now, Mark. So as much as I like them, I own them. But I don't know that there's a lot of room to the upside right now with Apple, especially with the disappointment with this launch.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. And Pete, I'll tell you, personal anecdote, my previous iPhone suffered an unfortunate wine-related incident when I was in Napa last weekend with John and our partner, Grant Cardone. And so I found myself in the Apple store or in the AT&T store getting a new phone. And I had the option to opt for the 16 or go for another 15 Pro Max, what have you. I just couldn't justify the 16. There weren't enough features, there wasn't enough gee whiz to it that made me really want it and pay that extra premium. But I will say this to you, though. We have to remember it's hard to count Apple down and out. They have the ability that when the next big thing in AI comes out, they have the ability to push that AI functionality out to 1.3 billion people like that, right? Yep. So they're still holding that card. And, it's hard to wow people. It's hard to have that black turtleneck moment every single time you come out with a damn iPhone. I get it. It's like it's hard to bring them back to the farm after they've seen Paris. Well, I don't know what you can do with another phone unless maybe, the 17 will teleport us out of Manhattan traffic. That I'd buy.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, at any cost. I'm a buyer.
All right, we're going to go to biotechs a little bit. We got two of them in front of us right now. Ascendis Pharmaceutical, it's a biotech company. These guys have had some very, very interesting results out of the treatment that they're working on. Very impressive treatment, as a matter of fact. It's all around growth. And the competition right out of the gate, they're saying right now, this drug is looking like something that could really be something special for them. It could rival BioMarin is one of the things that the people are talking about. We've got high short interest. That's usually pretty good. Maybe you get a squeeze. You've got a cash burn that's pretty high. That's a little bit scary because you only can fly as much as you can as far as what money you've got to be able to spend it, right? So that's a little bit something where I'm a little bit nervous right now. They do have a strong pipeline, though, and they've got multiple names that are out there in phase 3, so they can get out there, and they need to get out there, and that has to happen pretty soon. So a lot of good news. There's 3 times as much volume today in the first 90 minutes than they normally would do in the entire day. So a lot of people are chasing this thing around. It's up 17%. Those shorts are getting squeezed. This thing could end up 20%. Let's see.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. And look, this interesting thing about this particular drug, this TransCon drug, it looks like this is an orphan pediatric drug. And why that's important, those kinds of drugs that treat rare conditions, particularly in children, this testing was in a group of kids from ages 2 to 11. So that's what makes me think it's in that category. But the FDA actually enables a fast track procedure, right? And that's important to understand when betting on names like this. Is it a so-called orphan drug that impacts only a certain number of people in the population? They tend to be priced accordingly, by the way. And is this a fast track? If it is a fast track, you could actually shorten your risk horizon, right? Obviously. So I'm pretty sure this was a phase 2 result on a fast track drug. I'm going to confirm that between now and tomorrow, but definitely something to watch. I wouldn't try to chase this when something runs up this fast. Yeah, maybe the squeeze gets it up to 20, but maybe it doesn't. And the sell-off, the inevitable profit-taking begins. So I wouldn't recommend anybody try to chase this one.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. And I'll tell you what, this is the difficulty of biotechs, and the difficulty sometimes of the pharma names is you're a little bit earlier on, because once you got to get to phase 3, and maybe it does speed up. And if that's the case, that would be something really great for a lot of different people out there that are having to deal with the issues and the growth and some of the numbers that they've got. Yeah. Speaking of biotechs, we got a second one, Nuvalent. Now, this one's kind of interesting as well, but of course, this one's going towards cancer. Now, some of the results that they've got have been pretty spectacular early on. They're moving into phase 2, so fairly early, but the treatment and the potential for this just looks like it could be something that's just off the charts, Mark. And I think what makes this so great is you've got a lot of high short interest, so people have definitely been betting against this thing going up. But they've got a strong balance sheet, which is very helpful here, obviously. If you've got the money, you can actually last a little bit longer. Maybe it gets to where it needs to go. 52-week highs today. It got all the way up to 113. It's pulled off of that. But this is one where it's absolutely ripping. The trials look very, very positive. So there's a lot of different things going on here that look pretty great. And with the short interest being as high as it is, there might be some squeezing going on, not just today, but into the future as they move along.
Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised by that. And this, by comparison, this is a treatment for lung cancer, which unfortunately impacts lots and lots of people in this nation internationally, of course, as compared to the previous drug that we talked about. And this is a phase 1, right? So definitely, as promising as these results look, they've got 2 more phases that they need to get through. And by the way, Pete, there's a reason why these names are so popular with these short sellers. These drug names tend to be rather binary in their outcome, right?
Yep.
It's not like, well, the earnings they beat, but the guidance was disappointing, so it was up a little and sort of, no. You pass phase 1 or phase 2 or you don't. You pass phase 2 or phase 3 or you don't. And if you don't, unless you've got a strong pipeline, you're DOA, right? And so it's a very popular sort of binary bet among the shorts. That's one of the reasons you see so much short activity in these names. This is definitely one to watch. It's too early stage for me. I don't do phase 1 in terms of my own portfolio, but it's definitely an interesting story.
Yeah, very interesting story. Speaking of interesting, we always like to finish up with a little bit of sports. Why do we do that? Well, John played in the NFL. I played in the NFL, played a lot of college football, watch it every week. I used to work at ESPN. So there's a lot of reasons why we like to get into the sports side of things, but there's always something fun out there. So I guess we could just roll it and see what John's favorite video of the day is.
Oh, God. I haven't seen this, folks.
Stat line you will ever see. So this here is Alvin Henderson, and he is a 4-star recruit out of Elba, Alabama. Now he's committed to Auburn, and this man is 5'9", 200 pounds.
That's a perfect running back.
So obviously last night, it's early in the season, Friday Night Lights, Alvin takes the field. So in this game versus Mackenzie, Alvin had 40 carries. 40 for 435 fucking yards and 10 touchdowns. 435 yards and 10 touchdowns. Some kids don't even do this in a season. If I started NCAA 25 and put Georgia versus Toledo, I don't think I could do this. So seeing that he had 40 carries for 435 yards and 10 touchdowns, you're probably like, damn, they must have beat the shit out of the other team, right? Yeah, so no. They lost the game. The final score of this high school football game was 80-78. 158 points scored in a single game. Now, granted, this game did go into overtime, but 158 points in one game is preposterous. But with this performance, Alvin set the state record for touchdowns scored in a game and points. Wild story.
That would be a great season to score 10 touchdowns. You ran for 435 yards, that whole thing. I mean, high school sports, you play fewer games usually, Mark. I mean, this kid must be special, and he might be committed to Auburn, and maybe he goes there. What are the chances that Georgia and Alabama start knocking on the door? I would say pretty high. So that's always pretty interesting. All right.
We might have some of those coveted name, image, likeness endorsement agreements coming his way pretty soon, too.
Yeah. You know if I was the head coach at Auburn right now, you know what I would do? I'd call up Bo Jackson up there in Chicago, who's a buddy of mine. We played together in the Japan Bowl and got to know each other in Chicago for a few years. Let me tell you something. I would say, hey, knock, knock, knock. What do you think about calling this kid? Let's make sure he goes to Auburn and doesn't change to go to Georgia or Alabama or Tennessee or anywhere else. I think Bo Jackson could carry the water on that one pretty nicely. All right.
Sure. But Pete, what went on this weekend? I mean, notwithstanding, we had a little early and much needed victory for morale for my JETS here in the tri-state area. And it was interesting. I was watching that game on the far screen at a Top Golf. My daughter's decided that she's joined and she made her high school's golf team. Nice. So now, of course, we're practicing. And I discovered Top Golf where we can watch Sunday football. She can practice driving and I can have a spiked strawberry lemonade at the same time. It seems like a good combination.
It does.
But apart from the Jets, we had some fairly poor performances coming out of some teams that I think we were expecting better from.
Well, I tell you what, and I'm one of them. I said I think the best team in the AFC is the Baltimore Ravens, right? They started out so far this year 0-2, and it's only 2 games. You don't want to get over, there's teams where they're too excited probably because their first 2 games, and some where they're overly angry because they're 0-2. And I would put Cincinnati in that, and they're, by the way, in the same Eastern of the AFC, but you've got Cincinnati and Baltimore both 0-2. Now, what's the problem? Well, the problem right now is Baltimore, who normally has one of the best defenses in all of the NFL, they can't stop the pass. The Raiders had success throwing the ball against him. Gardner Minshew, a fun kid, a guy who does a lot of fun pranks. He's got the great mustache and hair, and he's an interesting cat, right? 30 of 38 threw for 276 yards. And then they go up the week 1 against Kansas City. Mahomes threw for 300. So in 2 games, they've given up 576 yards with throwing the football. Then you look over at the Bengals, and you're like, okay, Joe Burrow, he's going to finally hopefully be healthy. They're going to get through things. They are fine on offense, but their problem is on defense as well. In game 1 against the Patriots ran for 170 yards on them. That doesn't happen to very many teams anywhere. Even the bad teams don't give up 170 rushing. Game 2 against the Chiefs, they gave up 150 yards rushing. So there's some issues there on those 2 defenses of those 2 teams that everybody was looking at for the AFC. Kansas City, of course, is number 1, but Baltimore's right there. Cincy's kind of right there, and they got problems early on, Mark.
What do you think it is, Pete? Any diagnosis of what those problems with those defensive lines might be from what you've seen so far?
From what I've seen, I will tell you this. The entire NFL can't tackle, and I'm not kidding to say that, and it's not just a slant, but I'll tell you this. I've been to practices. I watch them. They very rarely are in full pads. They can't do full tackling drills anymore, basically, in the NFL because they don't want to get somebody hurt because everybody's getting paid $1 gazillion, right? So the problem is they can't tackle. So the teams that actually can run the ball really well are really going to have the advantage because if you run well, you pass well. And, if you can only pass, sometimes the run's going to be an issue. But running the football has turned into something. It's kind of funny because you look around the NFL and all we do is talk about the pass plays and the wide receivers. The reality is look each week. Whoever has success running the football has a really good chance of winning the game. And that's just the way it is and the way it's been, and nobody ever wants to address it. It's amazing.
I love it. Great insight, Pete. Great insight.
I got a picture for you that you got to see.
Oh, no, wait a minute. We have another graphic? How graphic is this graphic?
No, it's all good. So my wife is sitting at home. She's not feeling very good. I go to the Gopher game, and when I'm at games, I like to stand, and hang out and do my thing on the sideline. My wife, of course, finds me and sees me on the TV standing there with my arms crossed, talking to one of the coaches for Nevada this past Saturday. And I'm looking at her and I go, look, are you the biggest stalker on the planet? I mean, how on earth could you have possibly found that opportunity to take that picture? But she did. And so that leads us into college football. And college football, Mark, has got something that has never, ever happened before. In the top 7 of NCAA football, 6 of which on the ranking systems come from the SEC this year. 6. So that tells you a little something about how strong the SEC looks and what they think of them, at least early on right now. And then we're talking about Georgia, and Texas has now moved to number 1. And obviously you've got Alabama, you've got all these great teams. Tennessee, who actually put an absolute whooping on somebody this past week. And I kind of felt bad a little bit for the team because you never have to apologize. If you're bad, you're bad. But they played up against Kent State. They called a timeout with a minute left in the first half just to throw one more touchdown pass. They were already up 62-0, Mark. I mean, it's like,
why?
Geez, really? Do you really got to do that? You actually could have got your own guy maybe hurt. And then where are you? Did you really need it? I don't know. But that's part of the whole thing. It's interesting. I'll tell you what, there's some Big Ten teams that are right on the cusp of moving into that SEC top 7. You're looking at Oregon, USC, and Penn State. They all look pretty good. Miami out of the ACC might be the only team in the ACC, at least for now, that has any shot. And they're looking really, really good. They got a transfer quarterback that is outstanding in Cam Ward. He's an unbelievable quarterback. He's already thrown, Mark, 1,000 yards. He's got 11 touchdowns, 1 interception. That's a guy who wants the Heisman Trophy right there. If you can play like that for the rest of the season, I think you're going to finish up and you probably will win the Heisman. But a lot of fun. I don't know which college team you follow most, but who do you follow most? Who do you like the most? Is it Maryland?
Ironically, Pete, I do like Miami. I mean, as you and a lot of other friends know, that's kind of our second or third home city down there.
Yes, it is.
And it is a fun place to watch sports. In fact, if any of our viewers have not been, for example, to a Miami Heat game,
Oh,
If a nightclub and a basketball game had a baby, that's basically what it's like to go to a Heat game in Miami. It's an absolute experience. But yeah, I like Miami, and I like their chances this year. And speaking of Miami, Pete, on that bombshell, I do have to remind our viewers that we will be hosting 3 incredible days. First 2 days, October 9th and 10th, Aventura, Florida, the JW Turnberry Marriott, a beautiful location with our business partner and friend, Greg Cardone. That, of course, I'm talking about 10X Wealth, incredible lineup of speakers delivering content designed to help you keep more of your hard-earned money. So lots of incredible stuff and content there. But of course, the thing we're the most proud of is day 3. That's October 11th. That's our Rebel Mastermind. There it is. Thank you, producer Jared. That is when we are going to do an entire day of live trading. That's right, folks. We're going to be trading with real money during market hours. We're going to start at 8 a.m. with the Rebel Setup with SK, Steve Kalasian. Trade through the day, demonstrating 4 of our core strategies: unusual option activity, momentum, instant cash flow, 3 at 3, the Rebel Pit, all kinds of great stuff. And of course, we announced the other day, we will be joined by our friend, icon, legend in financial news broadcast, Liz Clayman. We'll also be joined by Charlie Gasparino, who'll be signing his new book, Go Woke, Go Broke. We'll also be doing signings of both It's Not an Option and Follow the Smart Money. It is a day that is not to be missed. If you haven't signed up yet, folks, please scan that code, call our 888 number, get a hold of our salespeople, and grab one of the few remaining tickets. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. And for more Rebel's Edge, you can join Pete and John, who will be back tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Until then, trade smarter, and thanks for watching.